Sri Aurobindo is telling us about how our material world came into existence. And what he tells us is very, very different from what the scientists tell us. He's telling us that because the Supreme Divine Mother, the conscious force of the Lord, obeyed his will for an evolutionary universe, so she left her heavens of perfect consciousness and bliss and power, pure existence. She plunged down into the abyss, into the night, he says. God's plunge into the night. And she made her soul the substance of this world. And because her consciousness is in it, in this substance of this world, we read, became a nurse of souls, inhabited by concealed divinity. This world is full of souls. Everything has a soul. The water, the matter, the flowers, the people. But their divinity is hidden. It's hidden by this appearance of matter. And so, if we look back to the beginning of the material universe, it looks as if it's just unconscious material matter. No? But Sri Aurobindo says, no, the mother was asleep in all that. And in her sleep, she was dreaming. And all those dreams have to come true. This mire, this dirty mud of this world must become a home to things that don't belong to this world, that come from all the other worlds that she created on her plunge into the night. And one of the signs of those dreams, it is the orchid and the rose. The beauty of the orchid and the rose and these flowers has come from other worlds. It's not purely material. It's a beauty that belongs to happier spheres, other realms. So I'm going to read on from line 172, where we read about she and her. This is the mother expressing herself as the material principle, the earth. A residue, her sole inheritance. All things she carries in her shapeless dust. Her giant energy tied to petty forms in the slow, tentative motion of her power, with only frail, blunt instruments for use. She has accepted as her nature's need and given to man as his stupendous work, a labor to the gods impossible. A life living hardly in a field of death. Its portion claims of immortality. A brute, half-conscious body serves as means a mind that must recover a knowledge lost, held in stone grip by the world's inconscience, and wearing still these countless knots of law, a spirit bound, stand up as nature's king. A mighty kinship is this daring's cause. All we attempt in this imperfect world looks forward or looks back beyond time's gloss to its pure idea and firm inviolate type in an absolute creation's flawless skill. To seize the absolute in shapes that pass, to fix the eternal's touch in time-made things. This is the law of all perfection here. A fragment here is caught of heaven's design. Else could we never hope for greater life, and ecstasy and glory could not be. Even in the littleness of our mortal state, even in this prison house of outer form, a brilliant passage for the infallible flame is driven through gross walls of nerve and brain. A splendor presses or a power breaks through. Earth's great dull barrier is removed a while. The inconscient seal is lifted from our eyes, and we grow vessels of creative might. The enthusiasm of a divine surprise pervades our life. A mystic stir is felt. A joyful anguish trembles in our limbs. A dream of beauty dances through the heart. A thought from the eternal mind draws near. Intimations cast from the invisible, awaking from infinity's sleep, come down, symbols of that which never yet was made. But soon the inert flesh responds no more. Then sinks the sacred orgy of delight, the blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us. And though a glowing form abides, astonishing earth, imagined supreme, too little of what was meant has left a trace. Earth's eyes half see, her forces half create. Her rarest works are copies of heaven's art. A radiance of a golden artifice, a masterpiece of inspired device and rule. Her forms hide what they house, and only mime the unseized miracle of self-born shapes that live forever in the eternal's gaze. You'll start, Canto.
The residue, her soul inheritance, all things she carries in her shapeless dust. Her giant energy tied to petty forms in the slow, tentative motion of her power, with only frail, blunt instruments for use, she has accepted as her nature's need and given to man as a stupendous work, a labor to the gods impossible.
All right, thank you. A residue. What's a residue? Something that's left over. You have a bottle of nice juice, you drink it all up, there's just a little sticky bit of syrup left in the bottom of the bottle. A residue. Sometimes it may be grains. So that's all she's inherited. This shapeless dust. That's all that's left. In her plunge, she's created all these many worlds, and this is all that's left. Her shapeless dust. But in this shapeless dust, she's carrying everything. The potentiality of all the worlds is there. But here, in our world, her giant energy, her huge, immeasurable energy, is tied up in all these petty forms. She's got so much power, but it has to move slowly in this material world. Slow, tentative, trying things out. This tentative motion of her power. And she has only frail, blunt instruments, not nice, fine instruments for doing fine work. Frail, easily broken, blunt instruments for use. That's us. We are the frail, blunt instruments. She has accepted as the need of her nature of creative force. She's accepted a labor that's impossible to the gods. They can't do this work that she has to do. But she's given this work to human beings, given to man as his stupendous work. There's several places in the poem where Sri Aurobindo points out to us so clearly what is the mission, the responsibility of humanity. And we are completely unconscious of it. We don't do it because we don't know unless we read carefully and then identify with what Sri Aurobindo is telling us.
Actually, this is kingdom of subtle matter.
Yes.
Life is also there in there.
Yes. Wherever there's matter, even whatever degree of subtle matter, there's also life and mind and spirit. Can't be separated. And then he describes what is this work, what has to be done. You'd like to read? Line 181.
So a life living hardy in the field of death. Its portion claims of immortality. A brute, half-conscious body serves as means. A mind that must recover the knowledge lost, held in stone grip by the world's inconscience, and wherein still these countless knots of law, a spirit bound to stand up as nature's king.
Yes. Here the word must in line 184 gets repeated, no? Here we are living, we are hardly alive really in this field of death. Everything has to die here. It's as if death devours everything. But there's something in humanity, planted in humanity by the presence of the Mother, is this sense of immortality, this longing for immortality, the sense that that's what we should be. We should not be subject to death. But for the time being, we are subject to death and ignorance, and that's because we have this half-conscious body. It's just an animal body, really, but this animal body has to serve the mind. We've been given a mind, and this mind of ours is supposed to recover, to find back a knowledge that's been lost. It will recover that knowledge when the spirit wakes up. But at the moment, the spirit in us is held in stone grip. It's held in the grip of matter. This inconscience of the material world. The spirit of ours still has to obey all these countless knots of law, the laws that govern this material world. But this spirit is meant to stand up and become the ruler of nature. Now it has to serve nature, obey nature's laws, make do with the bodies that nature gives. But this spirit, when the mother's labor is complete, it has to stand up as the king of nature. That's the task that we human beings have to do.
The question, what are the knots of law?
The knots of law. Well, there's certain rules about matter which we are unable to break. We are tied up in them. Yeah? These are the laws of nature. Martin.
Mighty kingship is his daring's cause. All the attempt in this imperfect world looks forward or looks back beyond time's growth. This pure idea found inviolate time in an absolute creation's flawless skill.
A mighty kinship. We are connected. We have relatives that we don't know about. But it's because of those connections that we can dare this task that the Mother gives us. Everything that we attempt in this imperfect world, it either looks forward or it looks back, beyond time's gloss, beyond the interpretation which is given to it by time and space. It looks forward or it looks back, it comes to the same thing, to its pure idea, beyond time, in the unmanifest, in the transcendent, There's a pure idea of everything that's going to be, that's going to unfold in the manifestation, that exists permanently there. And because it exists there, things here try to become more and more and more what they are meant to be. Because of that pure idea and firm, unchanging, inviolate type. It's a typal form of every single thing, of everything. That pure idea and that firm, inviolate type lives in an absolute creation far beyond our world. There, everything is made with flawless skill, without any imperfection at all.
I think these two lines relate to the realm of subtle matter.
No, I think these two lines relate to something far beyond the realm of subtle matter. But the realm of subtle matter is also trying to realize these
I
perfect forms.
was wondering if these two lines try to connect the material world back to the
origin, to the origin.
Was the glass in that
Gloss. So,
not shining like
no, that it doesn't mean that. It's connected with a glossary.
okay.
You know what is a glossary?
List of
Yeah, at the end, if you have a book with many unfamiliar words in it, at the end there'll be a glossary which gives you some idea what those words mean. So when I'm explaining these lines to you, I'm giving you a kind of gloss, a kind of interpretation of what they mean. Yeah? So time does that. Time interprets or expresses these pure ideas and firm, inviolate types in many, many different forms. But those forms are only possible because the perfect version is there in the transcendent realm. Yeah. So, but we also, in us, there's this creative drive to recreate these perfect forms. So that's what he tells us. That's the next thing that comes. Kamala.
To seize the absolute in shapes that pass. To fix the eternal touch in time made things. This is the law of all perfection here.
If we're trying to reach perfection here, this is the way to do it. To get some touch of the eternal in the things that are made in time, whatever forms they are. To be able, if the artist's consciousness can get some little hold on what is absolute, what is perfect, in these transient shapes that he makes, or the shapes that pass, that don't last. That's the law of all perfection here. And the artist does succeed in doing that to a certain extent. Mihong. A fragment.
A fragment here is caught over heaven's design. Else could we never hope for greater life and ecstasy and glory would not be.
So we do catch just a fragment, a little bit of heaven's design. And because we can do that, we can hope for greater life, and we can experience ecstasy and glory that wouldn't be possible if this were a purely material world. Sebastian.
Even in the littleness of our mortal state, even in this prison house of mortal form, the brilliant passage, the infallible flame, is driven through gross walls of nerve and brain. A splendor presses on a power breaks through. Earth's great dark barrier is removed awhile. The inconsigned seal is lifted from our eyes, and we grow vessels of a creative mind.
This is what happens when true inspiration comes. Even in this littleness of our mortal state, it happens to human beings who are in the grip of ignorance and death. Even in this prison house of outer form, something happens, a brilliant passage for the infallible flame. That passage gets driven through the gross physical walls of our nerve and our brain. A splendor presses, or a power breaks through. So when somebody receives true inspiration like that, then this great dull barrier of matter is lifted from our eyes. We can see things differently. And the person to whom that happens becomes a vessel, a container of creative might, creative power. He becomes a great artist in one way or another. And Sri Aurobindo describes what that feels like. Rita.
The enthusiasm of a divine surprise pervades our life. A mystic stir is felt. A joyful anguish trembles in our limbs. A dream of beauty dances through the heart. A thought from the eternal mind draws near. Intimations cast from the invisible, awaking from infinity's sleep come down, symbols of that which never yet was made.
That's what it feels like. An enthusiasm of divine surprise. The first thing is astonishment. Pervades our life. And we feel something waking up, a mystic stir is felt. It's painful because that's so intense, but it's a joyful anguish, and the body trembles. But a dream of beauty dances through the heart. It may be beauty of form, or beauty of words, or music, or colors. A thought from the eternal mind comes near to us. Intimations, hints that are cast on us from invisible powers. Those intimations, those hints are waking from infinity's sleep. They wake up from infinity and they come down to us. And they bring us symbols of that which never yet was made. That's how true art happens. Did we read about the birds on timeless trees? We had that a couple of weeks ago. It describes how the thoughts of the divine as the eternal child, they wake up in that world, in the subtle physical world. And there they take on beautiful colors. And the air, the atmosphere of that world is so full of light. And then they take dream-hued rest. They rest like birds on timeless trees. This is beyond time. No? They rest for a little while in that world before they dive to float on earth time's sea. They dive down into our world, and here they take form, dictated by time's gloss. So that's the relationship between the two worlds. Joel, would you read, please?
But soon the inert flesh responds no more. Then sinks the sacred orgy of delight, the blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us, and though a glowing form abides, astonishing earth, imagine supreme, too little of what was meant has left a trace.
So the inspiration passes because of the incapacity of our body and brain, our inert flesh. It can't respond. It responds a little bit, but can't respond fully. So that sacred orgy of delight we were experiencing fades away. The blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us. And some wonderful creation, a glowing form, may abide, remain, and people may admire it and be astonished and wonder how such a perfect creation could come about. But the artist knows that too little of what was meant has left a trace. Lela.
Earth's eyes half see, her forces half create, her rarest works are copies of the heavens are. The radiance of the golden artifice, the masterpiece of inspired device and rule. Her forms hide what they house, and only nine, the unceased miracle of self-born shapes that live forever in the eternal gaze.
Yes, so this is the difference between the material world and the world of subtle matter. Our eyes only half see. Our forces half create. There is creative work, but it's not complete. And the most beautiful works of earth, of nature, perhaps we can say, they are just copies of the art which prevails on the higher levels. Her forms, even if they're radiant with golden artifice, they're so beautiful, a masterpiece of inspired device and rule. Many of the things that nature makes are like that, no? Still, her forms, Earth's forms, hide the spirit that is living within them. They hide what they house. And their beauty is only mimicking, miming the unseized miracle of self-born shapes that live forever on the higher levels in the eternal's gaze. What the eternal has seen and willed. Whatever is on the lower levels is only a copy of that, an imperfect copy. Especially here in our world. Charlene.
Here in the difficult, half-finished world is the slow toiling of unconscious powers. Here is man's ignorant, divining mind, his genius born from an inconscient soil. Copy on earth's copies is his art.
Thank you. Here in our difficult, half-finished world. That's the trouble, the difficulty with our world, no? That it's still growing and changes. It's not a perfect typal world like the other ones that are described here. Here, in this difficult, half-finished world, there are unconscious powers, powers that are unconscious of their final potential. They are working very hard and very slowly. Here is our human, ignorant mind, but our mind is also divining. A diviner is somebody who can use intuition to discover things. He can find water. He can't really tell you how he knows that there's water there, but he knows. No? Or sometimes people divine gold, all kinds of things. So our mind is ignorant, but it does have this capacity of some intuition. Human genius is born from this inconscient soil, this basis of matter. So even the genius here has to copy on earth's copies of heaven's art. No? Earth's rarest works are copies of heaven's art. So that's what we copy when we want to make beautiful things. Praveen.
For when he strives for things surpassing earth, too rude the workman's tools, too crude his stuff, and hardly with his heart's blood he achieves his transient house of the divine ideal, his figure of a time in for eternal.
So, when the human artist strives for things that go beyond the material, things surpassing earth, his tools are too clumsy and rough, and the substance he has to work with is too crude. So only with immense effort he achieves something, some creative, some creation, which for him holds the divine idea. His transient house, the divine idea doesn't live there permanently, but it stays there for a time. A time in, a place in time where the unborn, the unmanifest can be figured for a while. Yes, Kanapan.
Workman's tools are like the frail blunt one.
The frail blunt instruments, yeah.
Same thing.
Well, it's not exactly the same thing. The tools we human beings have to work with, those frail blunt instruments are what the mother has to work with. That's us. We go a little bit further. Amrita.
Our being thrills with high our memories and would bring down the latest years here. But to divine for every natural scheme beyond our reach, the eternal marvels in us. Absolute, they dwell, unborn, immutable, immaculate in the Spirit's basis air, immortal in a world of motionless time, and an unchanging muse of deep self-space.
So those inspirations we receive, the highest ones, thrills our being. Those are memories, memories from our origin, our high, far origin. So when we get touched by those memories, we would like to make them real here. We want to bring down their dateless meanings here. But they are too divine for earthly nature's scheme. Those eternal marvels that we faintly remember, or that glimpses of them come to us, no? They are far beyond our reach. They are absolute and perfect. There they dwell beyond the manifestation, unborn, immutable, unchanging, immaculate, absolutely perfect in the deathless air of the Spirit. Immortal, not subject to death, because they live in a world of motionless time, where time doesn't move. And in a state, a muse, a concentrated, unchanging muse of deep self-space. We'll stop there for today. A residue, her sole inheritance, all things she carries in her shapeless dust. Her giant energy tied to petty forms, in the slow, tentative motion of her power, with only frail, blunt instruments for use, she has accepted as her nature's need, and given to man as his stupendous work, a labor to the gods impossible. A life living hardly in a field of death, its portion claims of immortality. A brood, half-conscious body serves as means, a mind that must recover a knowledge lost, held in stone grip by the world's inconscience, and wearing still these countless knots of law, a spirit bound, stand up as nature's king. A mighty kinship is this daring's cause. All we attempt in this imperfect world looks forward or looks back beyond time's gloss to its pure idea and firm, inviolate type in an absolute creation's flawless skill. To seize the absolute in shapes that pass, to fix the eternal's touch in time-made things. This is the law of all perfection here. A fragment here is caught of heaven's design, else could we never hope for greater life, and ecstasy and glory could not be. Even in the littleness of our mortal state, even in this prison house of outer form, a brilliant passage for the infallible flame is driven through gross walls of nerve and brain. A splendor presses, or a power breaks through. Earth's great dull barrier is removed awhile. The inconscient seal is lifted from our eyes, and we grow vessels of creative might. The enthusiasm of a divine surprise pervades our life. A mystic stir is felt. A joyful anguish trembles in our limbs. A dream of beauty dances through the heart. A thought from the eternal mind draws near. Intimations cast from the invisible, awaking from infinity's sleep, come down. Symbols of that which never yet was made. But soon the inert flesh responds no more. Then sinks the sacred orgy of delight. The blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us, and though a glowing form abides, astonishing earth, imagined supreme, too little of what was meant has left a trace. Earth's eyes half see, her forces half create. Her rarest works are copies of heaven's art. A radiance of a golden artifice, a masterpiece of inspired device and rule. Her forms hide what they house, and only mime the unseized miracle of self-born shapes that live forever in the eternal's gaze. Here in a difficult, half-finished world is a slow toiling of unconscious powers. Here is man's ignorant, divining mind, his genius born from an inconscient soil. To copy on earth's copies is his art. For when he strives for things surpassing earth, too rude the workman's tools, too crude his stuff, and hardly with his heart's blood he achieves his transient house of the divine idea, his figure of a time in for the unborn. Our being thrills with high, far memories, and would bring down their dateless meanings here. But too divine for earthly nature's scheme, beyond our reach the eternal marvels blaze. Absolute they dwell, unborn, immutable, immaculate in the Spirit's deathless air, immortal in a world of motionless time, and an unchanging muse of deep self-space.